I just got my copy of Sheila's book. Can't wait to read it. Read an excerpt earlier. It was awesome. I used to live in Alberta for 2 years. If I was still there, I'm voting separation or 51st state, whatever you want to call it. I'm getting out of Dodge. I don't care. So good luck to Sheila on her
I'm
magnificent.
Albertan, by the way. I don't know if you knew that I was born there,
No,
but
I did not
yeah.
know that, Drea.
Yeah.
So, speaking of Alberta, why don't we throw to Premier Danielle Smith not backing down to some woke reporter?
There were some students outside critical of your policies, some critical of the transgender policies, saying that they're harmful to trans youth. Others talking about the bargaining agreement with teachers in October and how that was handled. I should note there was also a smaller group who was in support and had a honk for Smith sign. So I just kind of want to get your response to the students outside who are critical of your policies, largely about the handling of the bargaining agreement and the policies around trans youth.
Well, I think as high school students getting ready to be able to vote in a few years, it's encouraging to see that they're paying attention to local issues and current affairs. I think that's a positive sign. So I don't have any objection to anybody raising their voice on things that they care about. When it comes to the teacher contract, we needed to get kids back into school, especially high school kids who are in danger of not being able to write their diploma exams, which is an essential for getting into university. Those are the kids that were very much on my mind as we were out of school for 3.5 weeks and had to defer the final exams. So I would say that 3.5 weeks does demonstrate that we value the teacher's right to strike, but we also support the right of kids to get an education. And so we took the balance that we thought was necessary. And I think on balance, most kids are glad to be back in class and most parents are glad that their kids are learning again. I think most teachers are happy to be back in class as well. As for trans policies, I think you're seeing a fundamental recalibration on this around the world. In the United States, I would note that 2 of their major doctors' associations have aligned themselves with our position that kids should not be receiving surgical treatment until they're adults. And we shouldn't be doing experimental drugs on children. That's becoming a very strong international position. And so I feel like we may have been first on that, but we do also want to support that when a child becomes old enough to make mature adult decisions and understand the consequences, that they're supported in that pathway. But when they're 15 years of age and younger, they're still a minor, and they have to be. There's a limited number of decisions that they're able to make until they're grown up enough to understand the consequences.
Oh my God, listen to that rhetoric. What does Skate Canada have to say? Are they going to maintain their ban on competitions in Alberta? And I got to tell you, the reporter, there's some kids outside, there's girls pretending to be boys and boys pretending to be girls. Did you find anyone, I don't know, pretending to be Napoleon Bonaparte or Jesus Christ? I mean, do we acquiesce to that psychosis as well? Dre, let's go to you first because I know you have a hard out at 1:45 the hour. What did you make of Premier Smith's comments?
Well, first I'm going to start with the reporter's question. I thought it was pretty fair, to be honest, and in the way that he threw in there was, some people out there in support. I didn't think it was too bad. And, there's students out there, so I thought it was a fair question. But she always nails this stuff. She's on the right track. It's embarrassing that she's pretty much the main premier. There's not much support in the same direction, but she's right. This is a recalibration we've seen in the UK, things like puberty blockers being banned and other places. We saw the WPATH file come out where it exposed that where we're getting this affirmative care guidelines, it's actually from professionals who basically admit, we saw in the videos, they are experimenting on these children. They don't know what they're doing and what the outcome is going to be. They know that they might be sterile. They know that they can't make these decisions. And yet here they are setting the standards for the world. And Canada, aside from Premier Smith, is very draconian when all of the evidence is out there saying that this is harmful for kids. We need to support their confidence in their body and let them know that, hey, most kids who struggle with their gender identity, well, guess what? After they have puberty, they don't struggle anymore. And that's the reality of what we need to be saying to these kids. And she's on the right track. So
you finished a long run. You're hot and thirsty. This is what we call a last resort. If your most recent electricity bill says the rate of last resort, then your rate is like the half-finished water bottle you noticed sitting on a bench. It will serve its purpose, but there are likely better options available.
You know, Daniel, to Premier Smith's point and Andrea's point, it's almost as though Canada is out of the loop. I mean, I look at the US. Within days of getting office last year again, President Trump restored Title IX, which protects women's and girls' sports. We saw that infamous medical clinic in the UK shut down, and it is now completely discredited. And yet when I go into a federal airport, a federally regulated airport in Canada to use the men's room, I'm greeted by tampons and sanitary napkins. Why are we still drinking this woke Kool-Aid? Maybe that's a rhetorical question given who's in office. But what are your thoughts on why we're not going with the flow of taking a stand against what I call transanity?
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. I think what this comes down to, whatever it says is, I think a big problem in like the grand scheme of wokeism, the big culture issue of our time is we have started treating adults like children, and we've started treating children like adults. And that has caused major societal insanity. It's completely inverted. And Danielle Smith is getting on in front of Canadian reporters and having the audacity to say that children are children and should be treated like children, and adults are adults and need to be treated like adults. This is where the country needs to go, right? This is reality land, right? Adults are adults, children are children. You know, men cannot become women, but if you want to pretend to be one, you're allowed to do that, but reality exists. Bill C-16, 10 years ago, Jordan Peterson, blah, 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 blah. But it's a fundamental unwillingness to acknowledge reality, I think a lot of Canada suffers from. And we got over Justin Trudeau and we wanted him gone, but we didn't really realize that there isn't really a mea culpa willingness among the Trudeau base. So what Carney has provided, and I would think Carney's so successful as a politician, we have to at least give Carney his flowers because he is doing well, is he has come in and he has extended the adult fantasy of many of the liberal base, where adults can be infantilized as children, right? So we're seeing one thing is that children being treated as adults, which is a transanity, and then the other thing was sort of this Carney, Big Daddy Carney thing is like keeping the adult base in sort of this extended adolescent phase where we can believe in these fantastical ideas, where we don't ever have to take acknowledgement and say, oh my God, our institutions failed us. They castrated the children, all these different type of stuff. We can sort of believe that there's this international order, grand rules, international law, like the systems are all that we have, and it's great. But again, all of this is broken down because no one believes in Canadian integrity, or half the country doesn't, and sees it as an anarcho-tyranny, where they realize, there's certain things you can get away with. You can threaten a synagogue. You can bring a bullhorn outside a synagogue and threaten it and know things, right? But you can't do that to a mosque. You can burn down a church and, every 10 churches are destroyed, one of it makes the news, right? Yeah. So there's been over 120-ish churches destroyed in the last few years. Hit the news about 12 times, so 1 in 10. Whereas, it's the opposite on a mosque, right? For every, 10 claims of Islamophobia on a mosque, only one of them is actually true, where it's like, okay, there actually was a case of Islamophobia. Don't, throw a piece of bacon at an actual Muslim and hit him in the head. Like, okay, fine. But most of it is the hijab hoax and all that. So I think there's a big part of Canadian society that doesn't, and especially the Trump derangement syndrome, doesn't want to come into reality. Wants to extend the sort of the last 10 years, pretend that Trudeau wasn't, crazy or didn't happen, that they were always these smart, technocratic world orders. Look, he's in Australia and the Australian liberals leftist clap. Look, he's in Europe and the Europeans are clapping. Look at that Davos speech. He's maintaining this technocratic bibbidi babble. And a lot of Canadian upper middle class urbanites love this because it is like a bedtime story with them, and it keeps them in this extended fantasy land that I think is causing these major problems in Canada that, extend out there. So in my analysis, that's the, I don't know if that's the Freudian or Jungian analysis of our country, if we're going to put it that way.
And you know, Dre, I know you have to go in the next minute, and I have to ask you if we have super chats. But to Daniel's point, and I think it's a profound one, this whole idea of treating children as adults, but only for sex reassignment, not for alcohol, not for cannabis, not for cigarettes, not for buying fireworks, not for getting pornography, not for voting, all of that. We have age prohibitions, but you want to take hormones and get surgery for a boy to become a girl and vice versa. Hey, that's diversity. We're with you. This is insane, Drea.
It's absolutely insane. And I think that we're seeing a lot of people really coming face to face with their cognitive dissonance because people are bolder now. The average Canadian is tired of all of this. We saw that with the Tumbler Ridge shooting, with that horrific situation. If you read the comments, if that same shooting had happened even a year earlier, there wouldn't be so many people comfortable talking about, hey, it's time to really reassess our approach with these young, vulnerable people who are struggling. And on top of struggling with something as core as who you are, you have society, you have the liberals, you have the left saying, hey, if anybody doesn't affirm you, they hate you. And so people have had enough of that lie. And I think we're on the cusp of seeing a mass change in that area. That's what I believe.
Yeah, Tumbler Ridge was a disgrace, not just for the massacre that occurred, but also to see law enforcement and the political class do ideological gymnastics to avoid misgendering the shooter. And to this day, Drea, as you know, they're not even giving his correct surname, and that's all about burying his presence online because the name they're giving literally doesn't exist. It is an absolute disgrace.